The Home Office has no idea how many asylum seekers have gone missing. The Home Office has no data on a third of people. We've got so many illegals that we're running out of hotels.
More than 14,000 undocumented migrants unaccounted for on public streets. £1 billion squandered on migrant hotel accommodation. A 23% rise in criminal activity. Police barriers failed, and within just 3 hours, leaked figures revealing thousands of missing undocumented migrants transformed whole areas into conflict zones. These gatherings were beyond dialogue. Protesters labeled Starr a betrayer of the British people. At 6:10 p.m., repeated waves called for the repeal of the Human Rights Act, legislation that effectively prevents the removal of undocumented migrants. Using its protections, migrants argue in court that they have suddenly identified as gay or converted to Christianity, claiming they would face death if returned to their countries of origin. These claims cannot be reliably verified and are being aggressively exploited. Karma stated his stance with absolute clarity. Britain's legal framework is not subject to repeal. I call for tolerance toward every community. That declaration effectively marked the end of his political career. At 6:24, a Stop the Boats faction began vandalizing a police vehicle. Additional units were rapidly deployed to suppress the unrest, but chaos soon erupted. At 6:41, fireworks were launched straight into police formations, staining the night sky deep red. Debris struck helmets. The chanting ceased. What remained was only the noise of confrontation. The core issue is that these missing undocumented migrants are entirely unseen by the state. Thousands of individuals involved in machete violence, sexual offenses, and drug trafficking existed without identities or records in police systems. Opposition leader Nigel Farage delivered a fierce rebuttal. 14,000 is merely the figure authorities want the public to accept. Analysts caution that the true total may be 3 to 4 times greater. In reality, this represents a vast pool of potential offenders across the United Kingdom. Within 3 hours, reports surfaced of 14 separate hotel fires. Investigations are ongoing. 62 people arrested, 142 admitted to hospitals. It has been confirmed that karma will speak to the nation by dawn. From London to Belfast, the country remained awake. In 47 local shops, fireworks were cleared from shelves in just half an hour. A chain retail proprietor in Northern Ireland stated that an emergency instruction had been issued to remove fireworks from shelves. By 10:23 p.m., a frantic radio transmission burst through in South Belfast. "We were not trained to deal with lunatics wielding these rockets. We are pulling back from Sector B." Officials in Brussels denounced the extremists flooding Britain. Starmer brushed them off as a minuscule fringe of thugs with no public backing whatsoever. At the same time, major media outlets rolled out headlines assigning blame to far-right groups and advised the public to remain indoors. Chants calling for an immediate withdrawal from the European Court of Human Rights echoed across Stamford Street in London. Inside the Home Office, advisors were already murmuring that if Starmer keeps gambling on this tolerance agenda, he could lose his premiership within days. Yet, at that exact moment, 3 new boats filled with undocumented migrants were detected breaching the Channel coast. In only 8 minutes, they dispersed into seaside towns, disappearing without a trace. Suddenly, Starr's address was delayed by another 3 hours. Then came news that threatens to pull Britain toward third world conditions. A red-level threat alert was officially declared online for women and children. In some classrooms, teachers were forced to sketch out safe route maps, desperately trying to ensure pupils would not wander into a grooming gang on their walk home. A TikTok video erupted with 6 million views within just 1 hour, showcasing activist Tommy Robinson delivering a brutal update. At this moment, police units are detaining the youths. Yet within that same final hour, 5 machete attacks have occurred nationwide. At 7:40, live broadcast streams were abruptly cut, blamed on technical issues, precisely as police vehicles were being flipped amid barrages of fireworks and flying shards of glass. Nigel Farage's grim warning that monsters roam unseen after nightfall has turned into a horrifying reality, as these untraceable individuals blend into grooming rings and drug networks, without a single fingerprint recorded. This is the direct consequence of leadership that places the Human Rights Act above the safety of its own population, forcing the public to confront a ghost force the state now admits it can no longer locate. On Twitter, political analysts proposed a compromise to finally make the legislation functional, sealing loopholes exploited through claims of sexual orientation and gender identity. They also called for abolishing the mental health defense, in which undocumented migrants swear in court that deportation would cause fatal depression back home. As Keir Starmer exited Parliament, A journalist from a right-leaning outlet attempted to shove this document directly in front of him. The Prime Minister chose to disregard it, opting instead to answer a gentle question from another reporter about the alarming climate agenda affecting Europe. Tonight, Britain is not merely confronting an immigration crisis. It is facing a shadow insurgency. Karma wagered his reputation on the sanctity of the Human Rights Act tonight. That legislation is being turned against the British people. When an undocumented arrival claims a sudden religious conversion or a change in sexuality to avoid removal, the courts comply. It invites deception. The thousands who disappeared tonight did so because the system is built to release them, not detain them. The machete attacks reported across the country are the direct outcome of a deportation policy Starmer refuses to overhaul. Britain is being put at risk. Britain is being handed over to international courts. For years, border force personnel have quietly sounded the same warning. The hotel arrangement is a mess. It is broken. Tonight validated their deepest concerns. Information from the streets exposes a pattern of complete avoidance. The same absence of documentation. The same exploitation of legal loopholes to delay removal. The same vanishings into the shadow economy. And the same growth of criminal networks that police can no longer infiltrate. An interview posted on Facebook reached 8 million views in 4 hours. In the footage, with comments switched off, an arrival from Africa made a blunt confession. In France, mandatory French classes, registration, and formal employment are required. But in England, there is no need to learn English. And you are placed in a 3-star hotel with 3 meals provided daily. The 24-year-old masked man claimed that the British government is extremely tolerant and welcoming, which is why thousands risk their lives to cross the channel in small boats. The most alarming fact is that Surmise is aware of it. They hold the real numbers. They understand that the figure of 14,000 is a low-end estimate. They watch the unseen population grow larger. Yet under Keir Starmer, every effort to shut down these loopholes is stopped by the same justification. It breaches human rights. Britain was once secured by borders. Now it is governed by loopholes. Fear of the European Court, fear of deportation hearings, fear of being branded intolerant for demanding security. Britain is witnessing a disappearance authorized by the state. Allowing 14,000 unvetted men to fade into suburban areas was not an error. It was a deliberate capitulation to the European Court of Human Rights. No fingerprints, no identities, no records. The so-called red alert issued for women and children is an admission that the government has lost its capacity to shield the vulnerable from an unseen predator class. Starmer believes obedience to a foreign court outweighs the safety of a British street. He shelters behind the banner of human rights while grooming gangs exploit those same protections to target local communities. A British pensioner who misses a tax payment is relentlessly pursued by the state. An undocumented entrant who disposes of his passport is permitted to melt into the darkness, free to build criminal networks without the threat of removal. It is a dual-track justice system in which the law is wielded against the citizen and serves as armor for the offender. The courts are overwhelmed with fraudulent claims of sudden Christian conversion and newly declared sexual identities, unchallenged falsehoods that freeze deportation flights while unrest spreads through the streets. Surmise is fearful not of crowds torching hotels, but of the headlines that would follow if detentions were attempted. Starr's refusal to repeal the Human Rights Act has transformed the United Kingdom into a refuge for the world's most wanted and a cage for its own law-abiding population. As police formations collapse and the sky is lit by burning vans, the message is unmistakable. The government has stopped governing. It has become the caretaker of its own downfall. This is not mere ineptitude. It is the cost of a prime minister who would rather watch his country burn than offend the sensitivities of a European judge. The magnitude of this deception extends far beyond a simple loss of contact. Intelligence analysts now warn that the figure of 14,000 is only the sanitized total, approved for public release, while the real number of undocumented men operating within the United Kingdom likely exceeds that estimate by threefold. We are witnessing the formation of a shadow state inside our own borders, a ghost population that drains public resources, uses the NHS, and occupies housing stock while contributing nothing whatsoever to the treasury. These individuals did not simply fall through the cracks. They have been actively empowered by a legal system that treats the destruction of identity documents as a clever tactic rather than a criminal act. Every piece of smartphone footage emerging from northern towns reveals the same troubling pattern of military-aged men gathering in areas where local police forces have effectively withdrawn. An undocumented entrant who throws away his passport is permitted to fade into the darkness, free to form criminal networks without the risk of removal. It is a dual-layered justice system in which the law is used as a weapon against citizens and as protection for offenders. Courts are overwhelmed with fraudulent claims of sudden Christian conversion and newly declared sexual identities, unchallenged falsehoods that stall deportation flights while unrest spreads through the streets. Surmise is frightened not by crowds torching hotels, but by the headlines that would follow if authorities dared to detain them. Star's refusal to repeal the Human Rights Act has transformed the United Kingdom into a refuge for the world's fugitives and a cage for its own law-abiding population. As police ranks collapse and the night sky burns with overturned vans, the message is unmistakable. The state has stopped governing. It has become the manager of its own collapse. This is not merely incompetence. It is the cost of a prime minister who would rather watch his nation burn than offend the sensitivities of a European judge. The scope of this deception extends far beyond a simple loss of contact. Intelligence analysts now warn that the figure of 14,000 is only the cleaned-up total, approved for public release, while the real number of undocumented men operating inside the United Kingdom likely exceeds that estimate by threefold. We are witnessing the emergence of a shadow state within our borders, a ghost population that drains public resources, uses the NHS, and occupies housing stock while contributing nothing at all to the treasury. These individuals did not simply slip through the cracks. They have been actively encouraged by a legal system that treats the destruction of identity documents as a clever tactic rather than a criminal act. Every piece of smartphone footage emerging from northern towns reveals the same disturbing pattern. Military-aged men gathering in areas where local police forces have effectively stopped patrolling. This course of action is overseeing the collapse of the border itself. When a country cannot determine who is within it, it stops being a country. The burning cars and smashed shopfronts are only surface signs of a far deeper decay. This is not simply a migration emergency. It is a sovereignty emergency. Under the shield of British law, an unseen population has been permitted to grow unchecked, forming shadow communities where British law no longer functions. Machete violence is increasing. Drug gangs operate freely, and police are legally unable to reach the men responsible because there are no names to place on warrants. Even as unrest escalated and chants of "Stop the Boats" rang through the capital, Downing Street focused more on defending the European Convention than responding to the so-called Red Alert declared for its own women and children. This is how a nation relinquishes its future, not to a foreign army, but to a legal illusion that values the comfort of offenders over the safety of citizens. Star may call for tolerance. The media may avert its gaze, but the 14,000 ghosts remain, and they are not going anywhere. Britain is now governed by a political class that would rather allow drug networks to grow than admit the asylum system is being exploited by false converts and economic opportunists. If those missing thousands were British business owners avoiding tax, the dragnet would be comprehensive and arrests immediate. But because they are undocumented arrivals taking advantage of a broken treaty, the government's instinct is not to locate them but to excuse them. The silence from Downing Street about the whereabouts of these 14,000 men is not merely neglect. It amounts to complicity. We are witnessing the mass production of asylum fraud, where legal firms now function in practice as travel brokers for the criminal underworld. They distribute ready-made narratives that convert economic migrants into persecuted victims. Within minutes of arrival, the Home Office has been reduced to a rubber-stamping bureaucracy for fraudulent conversion claims that everyone recognizes as false. K-Dharma refuses to shut down the Christian convert loophole because he fears the opinion pages of The Guardian more than the gangs spreading across British streets. This is no longer just about immigration figures. It is about the complete corruption of truth itself. Foreign nationals openly mock our justice system, while British grandmothers fear walking to local shops. The Red Alert warning effectively informs women that their freedom of movement has been revoked to accommodate the unchecked arrival of men from cultures that treat them as property. It represents the surrender of public space. Whole neighborhoods are being reshaped without a single ballot being cast. Police understand that if they enter these new ghost districts, they will face violence that the political class will excuse as community tensions. Officers are demoralized, knowing they risk their lives to arrest men who will be back on the streets by morning under a different name. Biometric systems are meaningless when the person standing before you holds 10 separate identities. We are financing our own displacement. Every pound of tax revenue spent on these missing migrants is an investment in the erosion of British public safety. The riots unfolding are the inevitable outcome of a social contract that has been shredded and thrown back at the working class. They see their history wiped away and their safety traded off to uphold international treaties. Written 70 years ago,